Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining our series, Building Community with Older Adults. My name is Christy Wick, and I am thrilled to welcome each of you to this event. This series is co-hosted by ENCORE Ministry and the University of Tennessee Chattanooga School of Nursing's Engaging Communities Tennessee initiative. As part of a now 5-year funding opportunity, we are working to empower faith and religious leaders, volunteers, and congregation members to support older adults and caregivers in their congregations and neighborhoods. More information can be found on our programs in the link in the chat. Reverend Michelle Hunter serves as Minister for Congregational Care at First Centenary United Methodist Church. She is from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and graduated from Memphis Theological Seminary. She is an ordained deacon, experienced in pastoral care and hospice ministry. Her grown son, Drew, lives in Auburn, Alabama. Her other child, Hamilton, is a 13-year-old Shih Tzu, and she is always happy to share photos and stories of either child. Welcome, Reverend Hunter, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Christy. It's good to be with everyone. I appreciate you taking time to join us today. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you to find a piece of paper and a pen if you can. We will have some interactive parts of our time together. And the format that we'll follow through is I will share some information. We'll have a little bit of moment of reflection, and then at the end of everything we'll open for questions, and that way we'll be sure that we can get through everything. But I do want to know your questions. The topic today is spiritual invitations of dying well, and that also coordinates with living well. So it's a very big topic, so we're just going to narrow it down to something that's manageable within about 45 minutes. And I want to be sure that we all understand that we are talking about generalities today. We have all experienced death and major life transitions that involve grief and new opportunities. So if what we're talking about today elicits a strong response for you, an emotional response for you, I just invite you to stay with that. Hang with us in this. Just take note of how you are feeling, because your feelings will teach you, and it might be a moment of breakthrough for you. It might be a moment of just learning something new about yourself, or new about people, or new about your Creator. It might be an invitation. Just your response might be one of the invitations for you today. So what we're talking about today is really the spiritual nature of the process of dying. And so that's not logical like math or engineering. It's more of, some people call it the soft side, but it is more about our feelings about the world and ourselves and our Creator. So you might find that this connects you to a prior experience. And if so, please do not be afraid, friends, because as Jillian of Norwich taught us, all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. So I thank you for your courage to join us today. The word courage is going to be kind of our theme word for the day. Cur, C-O-R, is the Latin word for heart. So the original meaning of courage was to live with your heart, to lead with your heart, to be a person whose heart is their guide. And nowadays, though, we use the word courage to mean heroic or brave. And either way, both definitions are fitting word to frame our time together, because we will be talking about dying well, which also means living well. It takes great courage to die well and to live well. And most people find that it takes courage to even consider the topic. So we will spend quite a lot of time, we do spend quite a lot of time in our culture trying to avoid death. We live longer now than we have ever in human history. We live better, cleaner, safer, healthier lives than ever before. And yet we work hard, very hard, to not have to think about death. And really, this effort to avoid death is the privilege of only the last few generations. About 100 years ago, people died without much forewarning. An infected tooth could take a person down within weeks. A small cut could turn to gangrene right away. War decimated entire generations of young men. And diseases like smallpox, diphtheria, and measles were all childhood illnesses that killed children long before puberty. In the not too distant past, death was unpredictable and relatively quick. I could go on and on with this, but my point is that because of the realities of the difficulties of living just barely 100 years ago and prior, previous generations were more familiar, more comfortable, and more accepting of death. Now, I want to be clear here. I did not say that death was easier for those people. I'm simply saying that death was accepted as a natural part of life. But now, though, death is a different experience. The average American knows of their death and deals with it looming over them for 3 years before they die. Much of this time is spent fighting and being a warrior and then finally giving in to that experience. Couple that fact with the reality that our culture is so hyper-focused on youth and maintaining youth. We have come to a place in this day and age that seriously avoids and even flees from death. I'm offering this to you today as a way to understand why this might feel so difficult to talk about and why it might feel so difficult to talk about with those that we love. As a way to understand what we need to put aside or not pay as much attention to so that we can figure out how to die well and also how to live well, we'll have this conversation. Because you see, these two things of dying and living well are tightly woven together. One of the basic teachers of the human experience, that teacher being death, has been hijacked by our current culture. And my hope today is that we will be able to better understand how these two experiences, life and death, are the same side, are two sides of the same coin. Dr. Kathleen Singh, who wrote The Grace in Dying, highly recommend this book for you, explains the 4 psycho-spiritual stages of dying as being chaos. I mean, think about when someone finds out that they have a terminal illness. Acceptance, which really is the eye of the storm. And then moving from chaos to surrender and from surrender to transcendence. This whole process moves us from understanding to a new understanding to a new understanding, all while a person's identity is reshaped and redefined. And this is what makes it so difficult. The constant letting go and accepting of a new, more complete identity as one moves toward a new and more complete reality. The interesting thing about death is that it takes us from a small bubble of awareness to a large eagle's eye view. An eagle can fly as high as 10,000 feet. That's almost 2 miles high. And they've been tracked at moving at 120 miles an hour. In addition, an eagle can see for 3 miles. So imagine moving from a very small human perspective to an eagle's perspective, flying 2 miles high, possibly as fast as 120 miles an hour, able to see a small prey on the ground, maybe a rabbit, up to 3 miles away. That's a change of perspective that we have when we are considering our own death or the death of the loved one. Now, I've seen people soar who do this good work of emotional healing and die in peace. Choosing this path can heal patterns of emotional dysfunction and pain that have been carried and practiced for generations in a family. And there are just a few, we're going to talk about just a few questions to consider and live with that can really change these patterns of dysfunction and put a family system or an individual on a whole new track of peace and harmony and living in a different way. Now, I've also seen people who, because of their disease progression, simply cannot do this work. For example, a person with advanced cognitive decline is not going to be able to navigate this work. And often people with severe chronic pain just can't get to a place where they can engage these invitations. And that's okay. That's one of the good reasons why hospice care can be your friend at the end of life. The right medications at the right doses can get a person out of pain long enough to do this good work. But I would invite you to consider, as we're working through our spiritual invitations today, that these are invitations to consider as we are living before we get to a place where we cannot do this work anymore. So I was a hospice chaplain for about 10 years. I really loved that ministry. It's very intimate, very holy, is very immediate. There was not a lot of time to spare and not a lot of games to play by the time hospice got into the picture. And in the hospice world, we used to say, you are alive until you die. And what that means is it's never too late to work on these invitations. So let's get started. The invitations I want us to consider today, there are 5. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. And goodbye. The first 3 are about remembering. The 4th is about being in the present moment. And the last, goodbye, is about letting go and looking forward to life everlasting. So our first invitation is please forgive me. And this might be the most difficult one, although they're all challenging. We need to keep that in mind. Please forgive me is about admitting wrongdoing. It takes a lot of courage to be open to ways that we might have intentionally or unintentionally hurt another person or ourselves. What makes this difficult is that it requires humility to put others first. It requires honesty to see things as they actually were, not necessarily the story that we have created and held on to. And it requires empathy to feel how others feel and to consider their motives and their choices. To ask for forgiveness requires that high eagle eye view that we were talking about as we reflect and remember and admit who we have been, what we have done, and what we have left undone. This is hard work, and it is not for the faint of heart. And what makes this so hard is that it makes us vulnerable. To be humble, to be honest, to be empathetic feels very vulnerable. And feeling vulnerable doesn't always feel safe. However, I want to share with you these words from Brené Brown. She is a renowned author and professor at the University of Houston. Her area of research includes shame, vulnerability, courage, and empathy. She reminds us that vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. It is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose, or to have more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path to choose. To be vulnerable is to live and lead with the heart. It is a life of courage. And to live with courage is to be vulnerable. Both are hard, but both courage and vulnerability open us up to being who we have been created to be. And really, that is where we are all trying to get to. That is our place of greatest peace. So to ask forgiveness of someone that we have hurt, either ourselves or someone else, is to take a step into the most complete and whole self that we can be. Brené Brown talks about the work of belonging. It's in that quote that I just mentioned. And in that, she doesn't mean belonging to the club, belonging to a certain group of people. In any way, it is about belonging to yourself. being able to accept fully who we are as individuals, that the work that I do to accept myself most fully, to belong to myself, because that connects us to the greatest source of love. So let me share with you a story from the Jewish tradition. There is a story of a king who quarreled with his son. In a fit of rage, the king exiled his son from the kingdom. Years passed, and the son wandered through the world. In time, the king's heart softened, so that he sent his ministers to find his son and ask him to return. When they located the young man, he said that he could not return to the kingdom. He had been too hurt, and his heart still harbored bitterness. The ministers brought back word to the king. The king told his son sent his son the following message: "Return as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way." So I invite you to take a moment to reflect and write the name of a person on your piece of paper, or maybe a note in your phone, a person of who you need to ask forgiveness, and maybe just a brief reminder of why. Our next spiritual invitation, is I forgive you. Real forgiveness is about remembering. Remembering can be hard and it can be painful. Sometimes it is so painful that our bodies forget how to remember an event that is traumatic or unimaginable. Remembering involves opening your heart to the full awareness that you have been harmed or hurt, and that it might still hurt. Silly and lovable Lily Tomlin has said, "Forgiveness means giving up all hope that of a better past." Forgiveness means giving up all hope of a better past. And she's right. It is about accepting that the past cannot change, but it doesn't have control of our future. Now, I will tell you what you've probably been told before, but it bears repeating. To offer forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It is not the same as letting someone off the hook. We are all accountable for the choices that we make. Yet when I forgive someone, I choose not to dwell in that place of pain anymore. Like coming up out of a cold pool of water into a warm towel, I choose to leave it where it is and move forward. But I want to be clear, forgiveness is not a one and done. It is, in my own experience, I have to practice forgiveness over and over. I want to forgive, but what I forget is to leave it behind. I forget to remember that my Creator is inviting me, moment by moment, into a new day and a new reality by releasing the pain. The wound that needs forgiveness can be so familiar that I return back to it. I hook back into all the emotions and the pain, and I jump back into that cold pool, and I have to start over again and over again and over again. But eventually, I can get accustomed to the lightness of this new state of forgiveness, and I return less often to the bitter, cold pool. I know that you're familiar with the story, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. It's a beautiful example of forgiveness in that story. You remember the Grinch he was just grumpy. He was a Grinch, and he went at Christmas time to the people who lived on the mountain lived in the valley below him. He lived on the mountain by himself, and he went down to the valley. He was just so jealous of the Who's who lived in the valley and the joyful Christmas that they had. So he stole all of their Christmas gifts. He broke into their homes and stole them, put them on a sled with his little dog Max, and drove himself to the highest place on the mountain to get the gifts away from the people in Whoville. Once on the top of the mountain, he looked down because he heard the singing, and he looked down and saw all the people in Whoville gathered in a circle, singing and rejoicing because they had come to Christmas Day, and the real gift was the gift of each other, not all the things under the tree. They welcomed him, the Grinch, after what he did to them, into their fold and shared their Christmas feast with him. So I invite you to take a moment to think of or write down the name of one person that you would like to forgive and why. Our next spiritual invitation is thank you, the work of gratitude. I share with you this video made by Louis Schwartzberg. It is one of the most beautiful expressions of gratitude that I know. So we'll watch this together.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now, and the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that this unique day is, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised that you have eyes you can open. That incredible array of colors that is constantly offered to us for pure enjoyment. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from moment to moment with clouds coming and going. We just think of the weather, and even of the weather we don't think of all the many nuances of weather. We just think of good weather and bad weather. This day, right now, has unique weather. Maybe a kind that will never exactly in that form come again. The formation of clouds in the sky will never be the same that is right now. Open your eyes, look at that. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. A story that you could never fully fathom. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. We all go back so far. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people you meet, all that life from generations and from so many places all over the world flows together and meets you here like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. Open your heart to the incredible gifts that civilization gives to us. You flip a switch and there's electric light. You turn a faucet and there's warm water and cold water and drinkable water. It's a gift that millions and millions in the world will never experience. So these are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open your heart. And so I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you. That everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you. Just by your eyes, by your smile, by your touch, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. And then it will really be a good day.
You'll notice the first two invitations of forgiveness are about the work of the past. This one is about the work of the past and the present. As we move through these invitations, we move from the past to the present to the future. This one is in the center. Gratitude is the thing that weaves it all together. So I invite you to take a moment to write down or think of something that you are thankful for and why. There we go. Our fourth invitation is I love you. The opportunity and the choice to say that we love others. This is the work of the present. It is easy to hold on to the negative and emotional wounds. But this kind of rumination and resentment only erodes our own contentment. It blocks our ability to give and receive love. Resentment becomes a familiar companion that bullies us and nags us, preventing any real growth and keeping us trapped away from any chance of healing or hope. But love is the goal. It is the primary tenet of all major world religions, and that cannot be an accident. If God is love, and dying is the process of transitioning back to the arms of God, then the practice of love is critically important to dying well and living well. There's so much to say about saying I love you, and I almost can't say anything. There's so much baggage around these three earth-shattering words. But most important is that we find ways to say it over and over. It isn't said or shown nearly enough, as evidenced by the radical discord in our own hearts, our families, our communities, our country, and our world. To be able to say I love you to yourself or to another is to be terribly courageous and vulnerable, of course. So I offer you this poem by Caribbean poet and playwright Derek Walcott called Love After Love. It is about coming to terms with the source of love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread. Give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit and feast on your life. The good work of dying strips away all the ideas and identities that interfere with our ability to fully love ourselves and our Creator. We identify ourselves as our careers, our family status, our bank accounts, on and on. The spiritual invitation at death is to be able to identify as a complete creature of love that we are created to be, the fullness of the love in whose image we were created. So I invite you to take a moment and write down the name of a person that you want to say "I love you" to and why. Our last spiritual invitation to talk about today is saying goodbye. And this is the work of the future. The word goodbye derives from the phrase, "God be with you," a blessing that was traditionally given at parting and in some churches is still sung as a blessing and a benediction. In the act of saying goodbye, we pray God's blessings on others. And Henri Nouwen, a wonderful 20th century theologian, preacher, and writer, says it better than I can. In his powerful little book, Beyond the Mirror, Henri Nouwen tells of his experience suffering a tragic and nearly fatal accident. He was walking along the side of the road and was hit by the rearview mirror of a van that was way too close. In the minutes and hours as he waited on the side of the road to be found and rescued, he wondered if he would live. Later at the hospital, he came face to face with death. In the long recovery after the accident, Nouwen says, "I realized at a very deep level that dying is the most important act of living. It involves a choice to bind others with guilt or set them free with gratitude. This choice is a choice between a death that gives life and a death that kills. I know that many people live with the deep feeling that they have not done for those who have died what they wanted to do, and have no idea how to be healed from that lingering feeling of guilt. The dying have the unique opportunity to set free those they leave behind." Nouwen goes on to explain that in his faith tradition as a Christian, he came to realize that life is a long journey of preparation of dying for others. We transition all through life, from childhood to adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood, from adulthood to old age. We transition from single to married to divorced to married to widowed, from child to parent to grandparent, on and on. But each transition is an opportunity to re-examine important exegetical questions. Who am I at this phase of my life? Do I want to be a person of power or of service? How can this season of my life draw me closer to others and to my Creator? How can I release the previous stage of life and open myself to the possibilities of this new stage? In other words, the act of living is a series of deaths, the constant learning of releasing in order to embrace the new. The act of living is a great preparation for the physical act of death of which we are so afraid. So, friends, consider today that maybe every day the invitation before you is waiting for you. The invitation to offer forgiveness, to receive forgiveness, to celebrate gratitude, to share love, and to release in order to make space for the new. It will take great courage, but you and those you serve will be better for it. Thank you for your time today. I'd like to open us up for questions or comments, and I'll unshare my screen now.